everyone, my name is Teresa and I am here with my colleagues Kate and Nora, and we'll be asking you some questions about your work and achievements within the astrophysics field of study. Thank you for joining us today, Mrs. Jocelyn Bell. It is an honor to be able to interview you. To start off, what inspired you to pursue physics?
It turned out I was good at science at school, although I nearly didn't get to do it because girls got sent to learn cookery and needlework while the boys learned science. But I joined the science class for the second lesson thereafter, and we did physics that first term, and I loved it, and it was easy. And I made the mistake of coming top in the class, which was not a sensible political decision, but you don't think of these things when you're 11 or 12.
Yeah.
So you started out as a woman in science in the 60s and 70s, and you're still working as a woman in science today. So how do you feel attitudes toward women have changed since then?
I can probably speak mainly from the UK perspective. I have some feel for what's going on in other countries. In Britain, women are probably still a minority in science overall, but it's vastly improved since I was young. I think in particular coronavirus has helped in the sense that the Oxford vaccine was developed by 2 women professors. So I think people realise that some women at least can do good science. Maybe all of them can.
Definitely, yeah. From your experience, do you think gender has played a significant role in your career?
Yes, a huge role. In a sense, it interfered with career because I was born during the Second World War, 1939-1945 war. And one of the consequences of that in Britain, and I suspect in some other European countries, was the men had gone to war. The women had stepped out of the home and done all sorts of jobs. The war ends. The government has to get the women back in the home to free up the jobs for the returning soldiers. And so there's huge emphasis when I'm young on women as homemakers and zero emphasis on women having careers. And that influenced quite a lot of my life. Not at home. Parents were keen that girls and boys had careers, but in terms of what was available for women, it was very limited.
Mm-hmm. So recently, you've campaigned a lot to improve the status and number of women in the scientific field, particularly with professional and academic posts. Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important to have women in science?
I think it's important that research is done by a diverse group of people. Indeed, maybe not just research. There's evidence from the USA that businesses that are the most diverse are the most successful. They're amazingly both the most robust and the most flexible. It's hard to see how they're both, but they are. And I think in research science, it's very good to have a diversity of people because different kinds of people think in different ways, come up with different ideas about maybe helping understand what we're finding in our research or maybe in seeing new lines of research to pursue next. So I think diversity is important, and it's not just gender diversity. It's lots of different ways of thinking, lots of different approaches.
Do you think we should have programs targeted towards getting women involved in science, or just aiming to improve the interest of women to pursue these kinds of fields?
This needs to be handled with a bit of care. At one time in Britain, they created special fellowships for women. They saw it as a good way of getting more women into the scientific workforce. And some charming gentleman said, "You're lowering the standard of this place. You should resign. Women can't do science. Go away." So they changed the arrangements, and whilst there were fellowships that were open to women, they weren't exclusively for women. So the women could say, "I got that fellowship in a competition with other men and other women." So that sort of stopped the kind of kickback they were getting. So you do need to be a little bit subtle about how you do this. Creating women-only things, I think, is maybe going to be difficult to manage. You can create things to increase diversity, things that are open to minority groups of any sort. And there are lots of ways you can define minorities.
Other than like from a management perspective, do you think that it's just beneficial overall to like women and men to have women-only programs? If that question makes any sense.
It might be, but the consequences of having women-only programs are so vulnerable to kickback that I really have anxieties about them, put it that way.
Yeah. So just changing the direction a little bit, the New York Times series Almost Famous did an interview with you, and it discusses how you were not awarded the 1974 Nobel Prize in Physics for your discovery of pulsars. Would you be comfortable expressing your feelings concerning this controversy?
I was actually very pleased about that Nobel Prize. People expected me to be angry, but there is no Nobel Prize in astronomy or astrophysics. There's a mathematics Nobel Prize, there's a physics Nobel Prize, there's chemistry, but there's nothing in astronomy or astrophysics. And until then, the physics committee had not seen enough merit in astronomy and astrophysics to give any astronomer the prize up till then. So this was quite a breakthrough in its way. And I recognised that instantly, the moment I was given the news, recognised that this was creating an important precedent and that other astronomers would step through that door as well. And that has proved to be the case. Since then, quite a few astrophysicists have had the Nobel Physics Prize. So it was actually very important for physics, that particular award. So that was good.
So overall, you're not angry about it?
No,
Okay.
I was more pleased for astrophysics
Right.
than I was personally angry about it.
So we've talked a lot about women in science and the Nobel Prize controversy. So I'd like to take the opportunity to focus on your personal achievements. So what do you consider to be your greatest achievement, academic or otherwise, throughout your career? And also maybe like outside of discovering pulsars, if there's also anything else?
I think I consider my greatest achievement is surviving. There were quite a lot of things against me, partly, being a woman of the age I am and at the time I was going through. Also, I married a man who had to move job every 5 or 10 years to get promotion. And so we'd move from one end of the country to the other. And it was a move for his job. And then I'd write a begging letter to the local astronomy place saying, might you have a job for me? And indeed, while the child was still young, it was, might you have a part-time job for me? And because of my reputation, directors of observatories and labs were often fairly keen to find a bit of money to pay me and give me a job. But it means my career it is crazy. You move from X-ray astronomy to gamma ray astronomy, right the other end of the spectrum. And then, after a few years you change to X-ray astronomy, and after a few years you change to infrared astronomy. And I mean, no serious scientist does that. That's a woman's career.
So you're still working today, correct?
I'm no longer doing research myself, but I'm trying to keep up with the research in areas that interest me. Yeah.
Right. So from that perspective, where do you see the future of scientific research, maybe particularly in astrophysics physics or just physics in general?
I find it very exciting because one of the recent developments in astrophysics, which has come about because the equipment's got better, is what we call time domain. It used to be you had to stare at a star for hours and hours and hours to pick up enough light to get an image or a spectrum. These days the telescopes have got better, the cameras have got better, or the radio receivers have got better, and you can take a very short exposure. And then you can take another short exposure, and another, and another, and another. And in fact, with the modern telescopes, you're not just looking at one star, you're looking at a field of a lot of stars. And that one's blinking, that one's steady, that one occasionally does sort of hiccups, and this thing's actually moving. What is it? Oh, it's a comet. Oh, right, distant comet. There's a telescope developing in Chile called the Rubin telescope, the first telescope named after a woman, the Vera Rubin telescope. And it's going to work in this time domain. Estimates differ, but it's going to be between 1 million and 10 million alerts per night. So 1 million things going pop, bang, whiz, or maybe even 10 billion things going pop, bang, whiz per night.
Wow.
Huge data rate. No number of students can handle that data rate. It's got to be computerized. And one of the risks of computerizing things is you tell the computer to look for things you know about, and you don't know how to tell it to look for things you don't know about. So watch this space. It's coming online in a couple of years, and it's going to be very interesting.
Okay.
We will.
And alert messages will go out to lots of other telescopes saying, hey, there's something there that's doing something interesting. You might like to look at it. So there'll be 1 million of those going out every night. It's hard to envisage.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's incredible though.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you were ever interested in getting into astronomy, that's the bit to go into. That's
Okay.
going to be jumping for the next few years.
So then also talking a little more about women in science. So for example, myself, I take physics, higher level physics, and I'm the only girl in my class of about 15.
Yeah.
Clearly there has been a lot of development that has been made in this area. There is still today this bias or this unevenness between how many boys and how many girls take science, and especially physics.
Yes.
So what advice would you have for young women who are interested in physics or in science in general?
I'd say to anybody, if you're interested in something, go after it. You're going to spend a lot of time working in that, whatever field you decide to work in. So if something grabs your interest, it's probably worth focusing on that. You'll have a more interesting career if you're pursuing something that interests you, assuming you've got, some choice in the matter. It's also very helpful to a subject if there's diversity of people in it, because different people think different ways, and that makes a more creative ambiance. And it'll be the outsider who says, "What about so and so?" And all the majority say, "Oh, didn't think of that. Yeah, that's a good idea." So it's important that, particularly in a research group, there is diversity. It works much, much better. But it can be tough if you're the only one in a class. It certainly tests your commitment to the subject. I was the only female in a class of 50 when I was an undergraduate. And it was in a place where the women got teased a lot, or maybe even sexually harassed a lot. So it does test your commitment to the subject, but in my case there probably wasn't anything else I could do, so go with it.
Just to go back to something you said earlier, you talked about how because of your husband's job you had to go from one end of astrophysics to the other end, and you're kind of doing a whole bunch of different things. Do you think that that's provided you with valuable perspective for some of the later things you did, or do you think that do you see it as more of a hindrance to your career and your professional development?
I think it's both, actually. If I go to an astronomy conference that's quite broad in subjects, I can dot around between different sessions because I'm interested in that because I used to work there. And that one's doing something interesting, and I'd like to catch up with this field. And so you dot around, whereas some of the guys are, I'm an X-ray astronomer, so he's in that session all the time.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it has advantages. It certainly gives you a perspective, and it gives you a breadth of knowledge because the different wavelengths tend to study different kinds of things. So the fact that I worked in X-ray astronomy is now quite relevant in radio astronomy, some of the newer branches of radio astronomy, for example. So gradually we're knitting the different bits together as we broaden our understanding.
That's really interesting. And just last quick question, what has been your favourite research project that you've done?
I think the most exciting, I'm not sure it can be properly described as my research project. I was officially working as a technician in an X-ray astronomy laboratory. You do X-ray astronomy with satellites, and I arrived just as they were on the verge of launching a new satellite, and I was to be in charge of organising the observing program of the satellite, checking the data as it came in, and generally monitoring the health of the satellite. And so the satellite duly launched and the data started coming in. Came over a computer link and then got printed out on wadges of paper. And that satellite was, well, our particular bit of it was unexpectedly successful. One of the things that happened was we'd have an observing program to observe a catalogued X-ray emitter. Let's say it's Cygnus X1, which is a black hole binary. And so we'd be observing Cygnus X1, and I'm checking the data as it comes in and say, oh yeah, there's Cygnus X1. But there's something else in the same field of view. There's something there. And that's not catalogued. And that wasn't there last week when we looked at this patch of sky. It's a new transient source. Help, I've got to find somebody to look after this data and get it published quickly. And so you'd find some poor unsuspecting research student and say, hello Arvin, do you think you could just check this new source for us? And he'd get a paper out of it, should be fine. And 10 days later, you're observing some other well-known source, Centaurus X3, and it's sitting there and whoa, there's something that's growing in brightness just there. It's another transient. It's a bank holiday weekend and I've got to find somebody to always came in on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But that satellite discovered transient after transient after transient. And because I was alert and watching the data carefully, we published paper after paper after paper after paper. And it actually just revealed how variable is the X-ray sky. X-ray astronomy sources rarely shine steadily. So, although it wasn't actually my research, it was my work and my alertness that really capitalised for the whole laboratory on all those new sources appearing. And we did very well out of that satellite. It was a huge success.
Sorry, one last question. Do you think that many astronomers should aspire to sort of broaden their knowledge? So not like an X-ray astronomer to just focus on this, but to just broaden their horizons just a bit to get a sort of, to maybe pick up on other things that maybe people don't see before because they're too focused on things they know.
Yeah. Something that I'm seeing now is there are people who have some knowledge of X-ray astronomy and some knowledge of radio astronomy, and they're suddenly discovering that there are objects that emit in both. If I just describe one kind of event to you, you have a black hole and something's falling into the black hole, and what tends to happen is as it falls in, it gets stretched into a sausage shape, and then the sausage breaks up and it falls in bit after bit after bit. And we're now discovering that the X-ray astronomers can see that, the radio astronomers can see that. And there's very new news that an elusive particle called a neutrino is emitted at the same time. And so this is now moving into particle physics, like they do in Geneva at CERN, detecting neutrinos, which are hard to detect. And so the whole field is broadening. And whilst it's good to have a speciality, it's also good to have an awareness of adjacent things, and maybe even particle physics as well now. It's broadening so much. So it's very exciting. There's a lot happening. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It was great fun talking with you, and thank you for some great questions.
Thank
And
you.
thank you also to the technical folk who made it
Yes,
possible.
thank you.